Hi, this is Tony Kent, and this is another episode of Tony Kent Writes and Cross-Examines. And the man who has put himself voluntarily into the world's most pointless witness box today is Scotland's Renaissance man himself, Doug Johnstone. Doug is the author of a long series of standalone books and a series that has just begun this year and is going to continue this year very, very soon, with a release in June. We're going to get some details about that in a moment. Doug is also the drummer for the fun-loving Crime Writers. He is a musician in his own right. I think he's the only one in the Crime Writers who has his own band. And any number of other things that you're going to be hearing about in the next 15 minutes. So I'll stop talking and we'll get on to Doug. Doug, thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tony. It's good to be here.
Really, really good to speak to you. I've been researching you, Doug,
Yes.
to get ready for this interview. And I don't think the word Renaissance man is used enough. But when it is used, it could not be applied more directly to somebody other than you. So you're the captain and the manager of the Scottish Crime Writers football team?
Well, the Scottish Writers football team, yeah. The crime. So that's not just Crime Writers. That's any writers.
I'm thinking bloody Scotland. Sorry. So there's two.
Yeah,
there's two. Okay.
There's two. That's a sort of another little sort of subset of things. Like, so the Scotland Writers football team has been going for years, and it's a proper like 11-a-side football like team. And we play local friendlies against like charities and other sort of youth teams and stuff like that. And we also play internationals against other writers teams. So we've been to like Italy and Sweden to play them and stuff like that. We try and play England every year. But the Crime Writers thing is a 5-a-side thing, which I usually play in. Yeah, but it's usually Chris or Ian or one of the big hitters who is technically the captain of that team.
Okay. See, I've never been to that game. I am a terrible, terrible footballer. I don't mean to be.
You should definitely get in the team then, Tony.
Oh, no, honestly, everyone would hate me. On the basis that I've only been doing this now for 4 years, and I think I need another decade before people will appreciate that when I kick them and they go flying through the air, it's not intentional. Right?
Well, there's plenty in the England team to do that, don't worry.
Yeah, but then they're not all 17 stone. It does make a difference. Anyway, so we've got the football team. You've got the fun-loving Crime Writers. I mean, you played Glastonbury last year. I mean, that's just how much have you managed to fulfil your childhood dreams? Because that must have been something you wanted to do for years.
It was utterly ridiculous. It was totally. I mean, we just kept pinching ourselves thinking it was a joke. And Mark, when Mark first found out about it, he was sort of getting in touch with the rest of the band, Mark William. And he just, I mean, the title of the email was, "This is not a joke," in big capital letters. We still presumed it was a joke. But I mean, it was amazing. It was great. And I really enjoyed that day. The week, I mean, it was kind of in the middle of a heat wave. It was like 30 degrees. Yeah. For like some pasty-faced Scottish guy, it wasn't that great. We were in a tent at least, which meant that we got quite a good audience because people were trying to get out of the searing heat everywhere else and sit in the shade. So I'm pretty sure that's the only reason that we got a big crowd.
Well, I'm sure that's not right, but I mean, it's what an amazing thing to do. I've got no musical aspirations, no musical talent, but even I'd like to play Glastonbury. Nobody would like me to. And then, so you've achieved that, you've managed that, you've got the football, you have that, you've got crime writing. We're going to come back to spend most of the time on. But you were also you were a nuclear physicist.
Yeah,
you have a PhD in nuclear physics.
Yeah, well, that was my first part of my life. I was science based. I went to Edinburgh University and did physics, and I mean, it was when I graduated in '92. It was the middle of a recession. There was no jobs, and they offered me a PhD. So I stayed on a grant, so I stayed on. So yeah, I kind of accidentally stumbled across a PhD in nuclear physics, like you do.
like you do, like who does?
Yeah. And then I worked for 4 years in the aerospace industry. I think my job title was officially systems engineer. I was never sure what that was. And I quit that high-paid graduate office job to become a freelance music journalist, much to my mother's disgust, I think.
So you had enough of making radars and weapons and things for military aircraft.
Yeah, I just didn't like that job. But I was writing fiction, but not taking it very seriously. I was also writing journalism and trying to take that more seriously. And I was in bands at the time and reviewing bands and doing stuff like that. And eventually, I kind of got some stuff published, and I thought, well, I'll just make a go of it and sort of stupidly quit my job. I mean, if this was like a time when you could just about make a living as a freelance journalist, I mean, that would be dead in the water now, but I kind of just got lucky.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, as a resume, as a CV, it's just an incredible thing to read. I mean, I've been doing a lot of these interviews, so I've been researching a lot of people, and yours definitely stands out.
No other nuclear physicists?
There are no other nuclear physicists. You're the only. I'm currently writing a book that involves a dirty bomb, and I can just assure you, you're the only person that I've already taken a note of speak to Doug about this.
Yeah, I quite often get asked about like nuclear like weapons and stuff, and it's like, no, I have absolutely no knowledge of that whatsoever. I did a tiny little book tour in the Czech Republic a few years ago, and I think they'd misrepresented me in the blurb before the events. So I think they'd put me in as a physics expert. So I kept getting detailed like physics questions, like translated from Czech into English, and I was like absolutely gormless. I was like, I have no idea.
So you started writing, your first book was Tombstone, 2006, right? Tombstoning, which is about tombstoning. Someone jumps off a cliff, and it's the investigation into what happens after that. I mean, did that start the ball rolling for you? Were you flying once you had that? Once you had your deal for that?
Yeah, well, that's not the first book I wrote. Like I think, like in common with a lot of guys you've had on here, like I had other novels in the drawer. But it was the first sort of obviously crime thing that I think I wrote. And it was set in Arbroath, where I grew up the east coast of Scotland. And it was about a guy who's about my age at the time I wrote it, who goes back to a school reunion, and people start dying off the cliffs. You know, the Arbroath cliffs are fairly famous, kind of very picturesque. So I was channeling a lot of my own feelings about. I mean, that was around about the time. Do you remember a website called Friends Reunited?
I do, yeah.
So it was kind of fueled by that, because people were getting back together with old ex-boyfriends and girlfriends from school and ruining their marriages and stuff. And I just thought that was so weird. I've never been back home because my mum and dad moved away, so I just find the whole thing weird. So that's what that book was about. And I don't know if I was up and running after that, but it felt like, you know, a foot in the door. Like I think a lot of writers are. Well, I've got something now. I can at least I know I'm not entirely wasting my time.
And what's it been? 10 books now?
11. A Dark Matter was the 11th. So that came out in January.
Right. So we've got coming out in June the sequel to Dark Matter.
Yes. So the Big Chill.
Big Chill.
So this is quite. I mean, like you said at the intro. So all my books have been standalone kind of thrillers-ish. I don't even know what you call them, but standalone books.
Yeah.
But A Dark Matter that came out in January this year was the start of a series, at least a trilogy. We'll see how it goes, both in terms of how I feel about it and in terms of how the public feel about it.
Yeah.
but so it's about 3 generations of women from the same family, the SKELF family. So there's a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter who have to take over the running of a funeral directors and a private investigators when the patriarch of the family dies. So that was the first book was them dealing with the aftermath of that, and the second book is just moving them forward 6 months, I think, actually. So the book is coming out 6 months after the first book. So
I mean, that's a really quick turnaround. Did you have them both ready when the first book was published?
No, I mean, I usually write a book a year, and I think it was the same with this, but for various contractual and publishing type reasons, we were sort of touting the manuscript around, and it didn't. So it kind of got, the publication of that got pushed back a bit.
Yeah.
So then I just kept on writing the second one. I was kind of getting on with it. So actually, by the time, so I mean, it was written before the first one came out easily. Yeah. So I've kind of got ahead of the game. I'm actually managing to write in lockdown, unlike a lot of writers. I think are struggling and stuff. But I've been okay. So I'm just about halfway through the third book. First draft. So.
Well, you've got fantastic reviews, haven't you, for the first one, which is A Dark Matter. I mean, the reviews are excellent. They're very dark, very comedic. It's the kind of thing that you can really see, and I'm not sure how often we should say this, but you can really see it as a TV show. It's as a setup for a very, very Scottish TV show. Yeah,
well, that's one of the reasons why I think I want to do more than one book in this, is because part of the setup is tailor made for more adventures for Dorothy, Jenny, and Hannah, and that obviously lends itself to television, and it has been optioned for television. But I mean, as you well know, Tony, that's like a million miles away from anything necessarily getting made.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, you could see it as I think it was Chris Brookmeyer referred to it as Case Histories meets Dirk Gently or something like that. So, which I'm quite happy with. That's fine by me. But I mean, I would love to see it as a TV show, and I think it's. I mean, it's the 3 central characters are 3 women of different generations. So I mean, it's crying out for, experienced actors to really sort of, you know, enjoy themselves in those roles, I think.
Well, when you look at it, I mean, as I say, the reason I say it's crying out to be a TV show, because it's manageable. I mean, it's a great idea. It's a situation, you know, not a situation comedy, but it's a situation. You've got your one main hub, you know, your one main set, and the stuff kind of rolls out from there. A lot of things get optioned. You're absolutely right, but yeah, quite a lot of things you see get optioned. You think it's not going to go anywhere. Whereas this is the kind of thing that you can really see would be on, you know, be a sort of BBC on a Sunday night or something.
Well, it was interesting because it was a definite attempt for me to try and write something different, because in those previous books they're all mostly pretty short and quite often just from one point of view, and they're kind of propelled by sort of momentum and like energy. Whereas this was like, it's written from, the three women are basically sharing, there's not one central character, they're sharing the whole thing. I split between 3 points of view, which, as from a writing point of view, had, you know, all sorts of pros and cons, but I was really interested to find that out. And also, like you say, there's stuff like, you know, they could literally be sitting there and the doorbell goes, and that's a new case, or it's a new funeral, or it's something else they have to look into. And it's like, well, that, you know, that kind of is such a useful plot engine to just have at your disposal, that you can just think, well, what's the craziest thing that can happen now? Well, I can just put it in there.
I mean, even for yourself, let's say for a moment that it doesn't become a TV show. I really hope it does. It lends itself to you being able to just churn out some books. You know, you just say, right, if you get an inspiration, and I mean that in the best possible way. I don't mean churn them out sort of, oh, we're going to put out rubbish. It allows you to have lots of good ideas to turn out more in this series. Yeah,
I actually I did a couple of events for Dark Matter just before lockdown. And sort of people were asking me, you know, what you do, and I was like, at that point, I was planning a third book, and I was like, well, I already have too much stuff, too many ideas for the third book, so it's probably going to be more. And now I'm halfway through, you know, I'm in the doldrums, you know, it's like I'm right in the middle of like a first draft, going, oh my god, why did I bother this? Because like your books, when you start writing something, you think, oh, this is great, and you're full of like momentum at the start, and then when you get towards the climax, you start to sort of pick up again. But there's a bit in the middle where you just sort of, it feels like you're, you know, wading through mud.
Yeah.
So at the moment,
I need this.
At the moment, I'm sort of, I can see it as a trilogy, and because there is one overarching thing over the 3 books, and then I think I might try and do something else, and then maybe come back to them. I could certainly see myself coming back to it after a while.
Well, one thing that I noticed reading all your reviews of all of your books, there's a lot of reference to, there's an ongoing humour. You know, a lot of people mention the humour in your books, because you know, I was looking through them and some fairly dark ideas. But it seems from, I've not read all of them, I've read a few, it seems that what is consistently there is some sort of dark humour. Yeah.
Well,
is that intentional?
It's not really intentional, actually. In fact, my editor brought this up about, I can't remember what it was about, saying, oh, it'd be good to have a little bit more humour in here. And I was like, well, I can't really just generate funny stuff, because it doesn't occur to me like that. I think it just falls out of the circumstances and the characters. Because I mean, I am writing about very dark stuff in the SKELF books. I mean, you know, they're surrounded by death all the time. You know, they run a funeral home, so there's death everywhere. But I think if you set up characters who are sort of likable and believable, and kind of, and they're aware of the craziness of the situation they're in, then a certain amount of dark humor comes out of that, because they're in the middle of it, going, "Oh my god, this is absolutely ridiculous." And I think if you're going to be realistic, you have to portray it like that. And so that's kind of how I think how the comedy comes. And I'm quite glad to get back to a bit of comedy, because with a couple of the books before these recent ones, it was they were like less and less funny, inverted commas, because I think the material was getting darker and darker, and it was hard to find where you would get the comedy in there.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? The darker you get, the more of a line it is to cross to try to have a bit of funny. So
it's tricky, isn't
it? I've got almost no humour at all in what I write. What I write is more sort of, is much more escapist fantasy than, you know, heightened stuff than yours. Yours is much more, you know, much more domestic in its own way. And so I think you have to get the humour into that. I think it's, I think you certainly seem to manage it.
I think so. Well, if you're trying to portray ordinary people, I mean, ordinary people realise when something is ridiculous, or when it's, and that's a coping mechanism. I worked as a writer in residence for a funeral directors for 6 months, and the people there all have like the darkest sense of humour possible, because they have to. It's effectively, it's a coping mechanism, because they're having to like basically deal with other people's grief all the
Yeah.
time, like all day, every day. That's their jobs. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense for them to have a kind of release mechanism. I mean, it was like the chat when they were sort of all sitting having their lunch or on their tea break was like quite something. I can't report any of it.
So I have the same thing in what I do for a living. So, I'm sure it was very similar. Dan, I've just noticed the time. I've let us run over, so I'm going to have to say goodbye very, very quickly so that I can then try and get this onto Instagram. But thank you very much, and we'll speak to you again soon.
All right, thanks,
Cheers.
Tony. Yeah, cheers, man.